The Boy Who Lost His Face by Louis Sachar. Chapter 23. Larry and Mo went home. David brought the blender and his wet shirt back into the house. Ricky was sitting at the kitchen counter. His face was buried in his arms, which were folded on top of the counter. "Hey, Rick," said David. "Are you all right?" David set the blender pitcher in the sink, then walked over to his brother. "What's the matter?" he asked, putting his hand on Ricky's shoulder. Ricky jerked his shoulder free, and as he looked up at David, his eyes were red and swollen as if he'd been crying, and his face was dirty and bruised. He quickly stood up and headed into the hall. "Ricky?" said David as he started to follow. "Go away!" Ricky yelled. "I hate you!" He disappeared into his room. David returned to the kitchen and watched the pitcher. Whatever it was, he thought, Ricky will get over it. He had a feeling it might have something to do with Ricky finding out he was one of the Three Stooges. "Well, I never told Ricky I was someone great. He's the one who built me up so much. He had to find out the truth sooner or later. It's not my fault." The glass pitcher slipped out of his hand and fell to the floor. He looked at it in horror. It was broken. He shook his head. That was close, he thought, if the pitcher had broken. Or it wasn't broken. He shook his head. That was close, he thought. If the pitcher had broken, it would have meant the curse was back and he wouldn't be able to ask Tori out on a date. He tried to decide if he really believed that Mrs. Bayfield had put a curse on him. Probably not. But if she did put a curse on him, did he really get rid of it by dumping lemonade on his head? Probably not. But if he did get rid of the curse and nothing bad had happened by Thursday afternoon, would he really have the courage to ask Tori Williams on a date? Probably not. But if he did ask her out, would she go out with him? Probably not. He saw Tori the next morning as he entered Mr. McFarland's class. "Good morning, Mr. David," she said, smiling. He turned away and pretended he hadn't heard her as he made his way to his desk. There was no point in trying to talk to her now. If the curse didn't strike by 4:17 on Thursday, he'd call her up and ask her out. There was no sense in complicating things by talking to her. She probably liked Randy anyway. He leaned way back in his chair, balancing on the two back legs. "So, anything bad happened to you yet?" Larry asked at recess. David shrugged. "My brother hates me." He was sitting on the grass, squinting at the sun. "Is that part of the curse?" asked Mo. "No," David admitted. "I don't think so. I didn't do anything to Mrs. Bayfield that would cause her brother to hate me." "My sister hates me," said Larry, "and I'm not cursed." "I hate my brother," said Mo. The curse still hadn't struck by 7 p.m. Tuesday, at least as far as David could tell. Maybe it struck, and I don't even know it, he worried. He was lying on the couch in the den watching television. "This is Jim Rockford. At the tone, leave your name and message. I'll get back to you." Ricky walked into the room. For a moment, he just stood in front of David, blocking the view. Then he picked up the remote control and changed the channel. David didn't say a word. He knew Ricky liked reruns of the Rockford Files as much as he did, and that they both thought wrestling was stupid. Taking the remote control device from him, Ricky sat down in the chair and put his feet on the ottoman. "You want to play cards or something?" asked David. Ricky stared at the TV. "Ooh, neat," he exclaimed as one of the wrestlers slammed the other to the canvas. "All right." "You know you think that's stupid," said David. "No, I don't," snapped Ricky. "Just because you think it's stupid doesn't mean I have to think it's stupid. I don't have to like everything you like. I think Rockford's stupid." He looked back at the TV. One wrestler was stepping on the other wrestler's face while twisting his leg at the same time. "Oh, wow, radical," Ricky exclaimed. David got up and started out of the room. "You're the one who's stupid," Ricky called after him. Wednesday morning, David leaned back in his chair, balancing on the two back legs as he stared at the side of Tori's face. "You don't know it," he thought, "but if nothing happens today or tomorrow, I'm going to ask you out on a date." His stomach churned. He tried to imagine the conversation. She'd answer the phone. "Good evening, Miss She'd answer the phone. "Hello? Good evening, Miss Williams. This is Mr. Ballinger." "Good evening, Mr. Ballinger." He decided it would be easier to ask her out if he called her Miss Williams. Maybe he could ask her to tea. "I say, Miss Williams, would you care to have a spot of tea with me?" "I'd be delighted, Mr. Ballinger." "Mr. Ballinger," said Mr. McFarland. David's chair bounced forward as he sat up straight. "Yes. Does everyone have the right to be happy?" David had no idea what Mr. McFarland was talking about, but he could guess the answer from the way Mr. McFarland asked the question. "No," he said. "That's correct," said Mr. McFarland. "The Declaration of Independence says everyone has the right to the pursuit of happiness. What's the difference between the right to be happy and the right to pursue happiness?" "Okay, said David, trying to fake it. "Not everyone's going to be happy all the time. I guess most people are hardly ever happy. You probably have to be sad sometimes in order to be happy. Sometimes you might think you want something, but then when you get it, it doesn't make you happy. You might be happier pursuing it than you are when you actually get it. He had no idea if what he said made sense or not. "Mr. Umbridge," said Mr. McFarland, "does that mean you have the right to do anything you want to in order to pursue happiness? If smoking marijuana makes you happy, do you have the right to smoke marijuana?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it's supposed to be bad for you." "Is that something the government should decide, or should people be allowed to make their own choices? Cigarettes are bad for you, but they're not illegal. Alcohol is bad for you. Even television is bad for you. What if it was discovered that television caused severe brain damage? Should the government be allowed to make it against the law to watch television, Miss Peters?" "I don't think they could ever make television illegal. It's just like cigarettes. The cigarette companies are too powerful. Too many people would lose their jobs." And when the bell rang, David quickly left his seat and hurried out the door so that Tori Williams wouldn't try to say good morning to him. "You want to go with us to the park after school today?" Mo asked David at lunch. "We're going to watch criminals pick up trash." "See, every Wednesday, criminals come to the park and pick up trash," Larry explained. "Robbers and murderers," said Mo. "Well, I don't know if there are any murderers," said Larry. "I think they are mostly drunk drivers and shoplifters." "Oh, I thought there'd be murderers," said Mo, obviously disappointed. "Well, maybe there are a few murderers," said Larry. David figured Larry didn't want him along. "Sorry," he said, "I can't make it. Besides, I don't think I should be around murderers when I still might be cursed." "The curse is gone," said Larry. "The lemonade took care of that." "I just want to be careful," said David. "You said 3 days was the standard waiting period." "You just want to be cursed so you don't have to ask Tori out on a date," said Mo. "Bullshit," said David. Larry and Mo looked oddly at him. For some reason, it sounded strange to hear David say bullshit. He felt odd about it, too, and blushed right after he said it. After lunch, he headed toward P.E. "Hello, Mr. Ballinger," said Tori, hurrying alongside him. "Hi," he muttered, looking down at the ground. "I liked what you said in homeroom," she said, "about happiness, having to be sad in order to be happy." "Yeah, well, I just had to say something," he said. Then he walked quickly away from her and then into the boys' room. "Bye, David," he heard her say behind him. He walked down the row of lockers. Lately, he had begun to dread Jim. He felt vulnerable there, especially when changing clothes. So far, he'd been left pretty much alone, except for being called a few names. But he was constantly afraid that Roger and some of his friends might try to steal his clothes or put a jockstrap over his face. He tried not to run around too much during soccer. He didn't want to sweat too much because he didn't want to have to shower. When he returned to the locker room, he quickly changed his clothes, then went to the bathroom and splashed his face with cold water. "Your brother's got more guts than you do," said Roger Delbrook. He was combing his hair in front of the bathroom mirror. "Sure, Glenn beat him up, but at least he fought back. That's more than you ever do. You just stand there like a pile of..." The gym teacher entered the bathroom. David headed outside. He saw Tori Williams coming out of the girls' locker room. He quickly turned before she spotted him. "What's with you and Ricky?" asked his mother. "He said he hated you." "I don't know," said David. He was sitting at his desk doing his homework. "I think you should go talk to him." "I'm doing my homework," said David. He wondered if Glenn had really beaten up Ricky, like Roger had said. Was that why Ricky hated him? He went into his closet, got his baseball and glove, then headed for his brother's room. He was surprised how nervous he felt. "So you want to play catch?" he asked. Ricky didn't look up from his paperback book. David stood in Ricky's room, pounding the ball into his glove. Ricky put the book down. "What do you want?" "Did you get in a fight with Glenn Delbrook? What do you care?" "I care. I'm your brother." "Unfortunately." "What did I do?" asked David. "Just tell me what I did." "You're a stooge," said Ricky. "Look, just because Roger calls me names, that's his problem. Names don't hurt me." "But it's true," said Ricky. "You are a stooge. I saw you and your stoogey friends. You dumped a whole pitcher of pink lemonade on your head. Look, Why'd you do that?" Ricky demanded. "If you're not a stooge, why'd you do that?" David didn't know what to say. How could he tell Ricky about the curse? Ricky would only think he was a bigger fool. Ricky was too smart to believe in curses. "Stooge," said Ricky. David walked out to the backyard. He tossed the ball onto the roof of the house, then caught it when it rolled down. He tossed it up again. It momentarily disappeared from view. Then he lunged and caught it as it rolled off the roof. "Careful," his mother called to him from the kitchen. "You already broke one window." "I won't," said David. He tossed the ball back onto the roof, just above the window. And that's the end of chapter 23.